We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. We're here live Wednesday night in the studios in London. And inshallah, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, send them via the WhatsApp, the email address, ahkamsos@imamhussein3.tv, or alternatively, give us a call here live in the studio, and me and the Sheikh will be more than happy to discuss your question, inshallah. I'm your host, Mohsin Shah, and joining me is Sheikh Ali Ma'ar. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
How are you this evening?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Sheikhna, we'll be discussing Hajj. We discussed over the last couple of weeks, considering it is the Hajj season, the different ahkam, the different rituals, and what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Tomorrow, I believe, is the day of Arafat. What are the amals of the day of Arafat?
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. The day of Arafah is one of the greatest days in the year. A great rewards are given for those who turn their attention, their hearts, their minds, their souls towards Allah Azza wa Jal on this sacred day. Of course, to be in Arafat in Mecca, outside Mecca basically, as a Hajj, or to be in the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, both has its great rewards and status and position for the one who is in Arafat outside Mecca, or in Karbala next to the shrine of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And we have a narration of this regard that Allah Azza wa Jal would look at the Zuwar al-Hussein alayhi salam initially.
First,
so he would take care of the Zuwar al-Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Arafah, and then he would look at the Hujjaj on the Arafat, on the land of Arafat, just outside Mecca. And of course, one of the reasons might be that Imam al-Hussein's blood and sacrifice kept this rituals and أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر. All these Ahkamullah Azza wa Jal was revived and established by the pure blood of Imam Hussein Salamullah alayhi. Otherwise, Islam would have been like other religions, deviated,
distorted, probably perished, but religion that no longer existed.
Exactly. So the first amal on the day of Arafah, which is the 9th of the Hajj, is to do ghusl, the ghusl of the day of Arafah. Al-Kaf'ami in his dua book, Misbah al-Mutahajjid, he says that it is mustahab to fast this day, but for the one who would not be in the state of weakness, because if you, especially now in July and August, if you fast, you have to fast at least 19 hours, 18, 19 hours, in some countries 21 hours, so that might cause weakness to the body, in which will prevent you from the dua, from the ghusl, as mentioned now. So he would say, if you don't basically face this situation of weakness, then it's mustahab to fast. And of course, the second amal is the Ziyarat al-Hussein alayhi salam, Yom Arafah. And also the third amal is to praise Salah after the Salat al-Asr, before you start the A'mal. So there are A'mal and deeds and Ad'iyah and such as Dua Arafah, the fourth amal, which you start reciting after Salat al-Dhuhr and Asr. So we try a bit pay attention to this holy and sacred day, to ask Allah Azza wa Jal for forgiveness. Those, let's say, who are in Arafat, for example, they have, of course, their own amal as well, in the land of Arafat, ad'iyah, salawat, and so forth. So, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to remove this pandemic and the bala and the waba from the face of the earth, inshallah.
Inshallah, Shaykhna. Shaykhna, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
We have also the Eid al-Adha as well afterwards. So on the 10th of the Hajj, we have Eid al-Adha, in which, of course, if there was Hujjaj, I don't know if there are Hujjaj for this year.
Sure, a couple, few. Locals are allowed to go.
Exactly. They would go towards the land of Mina, to do the a'mal of Mina and then sacrifice at the end a qurbani. And of course we can do so by sending, let's say, money abroad to the countries or cities in which they're in need of, there's poverty ala kulli hal, there's a need of financial help and support. We try to do the qurbani there abroad. But in overall, it's a day of Eid. People celebrate on this day.
Yes.
However, let's see what is the real meaning of Eid in the narration of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam in the hadith. Because in our understanding and notion that Eid is the day you celebrate, you go out to a theme park, let's say, for the kids to enjoy. Sweets are given, let's say, banquets, and so forth.
Visit a lot of family, visit the graveyard. That's very common with our community.
Exactly. However, Imam Amir al-Mu'minin Ali alayhi salam, he gives a great description or definition to the Eid itself, the day of Eid. The Imam alayhi salam says, وَكُلَّ يَوْمٍ لَا يُعْصَى اللَّهِ فِيهِ فَهُوَ يوم عيد. The day in which Allah is not disobeyed, then that is the day of Eid. This is the true Eid. That on this day I have no sins at all. On this day I have obeyed Allah Azza wa Jalla 100%. That is the day of Eid in reality. Otherwise I can celebrate every Eid, enjoy, and even A'udhu Billah might commit sins, play music, I don't know. على كل حال. So in overall, the Eid day is the day in which we have to turn to Allah Azza wa Jalla as well. والصلاة العيد عبادة, also, and so forth. زيارة الحسين عليه السلام, and so forth. Another narration or the dua in the qunut of the day of Eid. So just mention part of the qunut of the dua in Salat al-Eid. What we say وأن تدخلني في كل خير أدخلت فيه محمد وآل محمد, is to have me with every goodness that you've offered Muhammad وآل محمد سلام الله عليهم. وأن تخرجني من كل سوء أخرجت منه محمد وآل محمد, and to bring me out from any evil, any على كل حال harm that you brought Muhammad and آل محمد سلام الله عليهم from this let's say evilness and na'udhu billah and so forth. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to be with Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam in goodness and the khair side, and to be away from the evil side of the na'udhu billah deviation and so forth. Because Allah Azza wa Jal purified Ahlul Bayt a thorough purification. يطهرهم تطهيرا. They are the infallibles, ma'sumin, salamullah alayhim. Finally, about the Eid, there is also a statement about how Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam in overall celebrate the Eid. For example, if Imam al-Zaman alayhi salam Ajjallahu Faraj Sharif, does he celebrate Eid like us? With joy, with
very nice
celebrations,
clothes, maybe a haircut, visit family.
Let's see what the Imam says, salamullah alayh. عن عبد الله بن دينار عن أبي جعفر الباقر عليه السلام, in which we just commemorated his martyrdom yesterday. Imam al-Baqir says, Salamullah alayh, Ya Abdullah, he says to Abdullah ibn Dinar, who came to the Imam alayhi salam, Ya Abdullah, ma min Eidin lil Muslimin, adha wala fitr. There's no Eid that comes, that approaches for the Muslims, be it Fitr, Eid al-Fitr, or Eid al-Adha, Eid Qurbani. إلا وهو يتجدد فيه لآل محمد صلى الله عليه وآله حزن. Except there is a grief, sadness would be revived on this day on Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So imagine Imam al-Zaman Ajjallah Faraj al-Sharif would be sad and in grievance on the day of Eid. Why? The man says لما قال عليه السلام لأنهم يرون حقهم في يد غيرهم, because they see Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that their right is being taken, usurped by others. The Imam has a powerful knowledge and strength and capabilities. Exactly. But you can't implement it because there are enemies of Ahlul Bayt who took and usurped their rights. Obviously. So what can they do? Imagine that you have the means of money and everything, but the government doesn't allow you to implement your venture, your enterprise, and so forth. You can't. You have everything, but you can't. There's a tyrant government prevents you from, implementing your business.
Yes.
So how difficult is it for you that you have to work, let's say, as a very small employee with a very small amount of, let's say, wages or salary? So Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam on the days of Eid, of course, they are in sadness, and don't forget that they are still commemorating the martyrs of Karbala, Imam Hussein salamullah alayh.
Indeed.
That the Imam al-Zaman, he cries every day, every morning and every evening on his grandfather Hussein alayhi salam. So overall, we have to make sure that on the days of Eid, we don't commit any sins, and we turn to Allah Azza wa Jal with the celebrations, with the family visits, and whatever we do, to have this taqwa and piety within this occasion.
I mean, I'll mention quickly to the viewers as well that just because we're discussing that to stay within your limits and to remember taqwa and piety and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't mean don't go out and celebrate. I mean, go get your haircut, go wear nice new clothes, fresh clothes, and maybe inshallah with your family do something, something out of the ordinary, within the Islamic limits of the ahkam. But definitely, celebrate and enjoy this occasion, inshallah. And for all those celebrating over the weekend, I know it's with the coronavirus and then quarantine, inshallah, you can still make something happen, inshallah. Shaykhna, back to Hajj and the ahkam in regards to Hajj. If one performs the tawaf of Umrah, prays the salah of the tawaf, and then does the sa'i, lakin ba'dain, after he recognizes that, I didn't have my wudu, are his rituals accepted, or does he have to repeat those rituals again?
For the tawaf and its salah, you must be in the state of purity and wudu. In this case, it is obligatory and wajib to repeat the tawaf and its salah, because you have performed them without wudu, and they must be done with wudu, especially the salah. How can you perform the salah without wudu, or an invalid wudu, for example, batil? So they have to repeat the tawaf and the salah.
Shaykhna, if one wears the ihram for Umrah Mufrada, but he doesn't perform any of the rituals and 30 days have passed, what is his obligation now? And I believe His Eminence Al-Uzma Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani Hafidhullah, I believe he discusses this issue. What does he say?
He would state that he remains in his ihram. Basically, he's got the obligation to perform these acts. Now he hasn't done them, so he remains in the state of ihram. However, Ayatollah Shirazi would elaborate on this mas'ala, and he says yes, he remains in the ihram up to 30 days. And after the end of the month, he is no longer considered as being muhrim. So just 30 days he remains. After 30 days, he becomes as a no longer as being a muhrim. So after 30 days.
Excellent. Shaykhna, if a sister wears the ihram, is she allowed to wear socks while performing her rituals? His Eminence, Ayatollah Sayyid Sadiq Rouhani, he discusses this. What does Sayyid Sadiq Rouhani say?
Yet he would say that it is permissible for her to wear the socks for the woman. Some ulama would argue that if they can remove the top part of the socks so that their upper side of the feet to be visible, that would be even better.
Hassan. Shaykhna, we're going to go to a short break now. Join us after the break as we'll continue our discussion on Hajj Rituals here on Ahkam SOS. See you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. If you have a question you'd like to ask or send it in, please send it via the WhatsApp, the email address ahkamsos@imamhussein3.tv, or alternatively give us a call here in the studio and me and the Sheikh, inshallah, will be more than happy to discuss your question. I'm your host, Mohsen Shah. Joining me is Sheikh Ali Ma'ar. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, now we were discussing the different rituals and we were discussing in regards to Hajj. Sometimes you may forget to do your wudu, or you don't actually meet the criteria. Let us continue our discussion. And the next question I was going to ask was in regards to an individual who is like, he wears the ihram and he goes to perform the sa'i, but he discovers that he didn't perform it properly. According to His Eminence, the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani, is he to remain in his ihram and repeat, or is he to do something else? What is his obligation?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, the Sayyid says that he remains in his ihram and he needs or she needs to repeat his or her sa'i and taqsir as well, both. However, Ayatollah Shirazi, he would mention that he wouldn't remain in ihram in this case after taqsir.
Okay.
So he takes off his ihram, but he needs to repeat his sa'i if he can.
Okay.
Otherwise, he needs to appoint someone to perform on his behalf.
I see. So a question that came in from the email, and it is that if a pilgrim knowingly and deliberately fails to wear the ihram, it is obligatory on him to rectify it. Should that not be possible to do so before the stay in Arafah, what would his obligation be? And this person says, I'm a muqallid of Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani.
In some conditions, the Hajj becomes invalid and batil, and the one should repeat the Hajj next year. This seems to be by the Sayyid himself that mentions that his Hajj is invalidated.
Wow.
In other words, batil. And he is obliged to repeat the Hajj the following year. So in some cases you see somebody, let's say, who misses Arafah, he doesn't go to Arafah, for example, because the Hajj, the main part of the Hajj is Arafah.
Yes.
So if these happen, then of course the one needs to repeat the Hajj the following year.
Wow. Sheikh, if a person departs from the limits of tawaf and enters the Holy Kaaba, would his tawaf be valid? Again, from His Eminence, the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani.
Yes, the Sayyid mentions that the tawaf, basically, because he left this limit, the tawaf becomes invalidated and batil. And the one should repeat the tawaf again. But the Sayyid mentions that the preferable or the awla is preferable to basically complete the tawaf first. That is now is batil, but to complete it, it's better to complete it and then perform it again. But if this individual left this limit while he was on his, let's say, he actually finished half of the tawaf. I think we mentioned 3.5 or 3.5 of the tawaf. He finished actually half of the tawaf, in this situation he can actually complete the tawaf and repeat it again.
I see. Excellent. Sheikh, when we go to Hajj, and when the men, I'm talking about, the brothers, or sisters as well, we are to wear 2 pieces of clothing unstitched. 2 pieces of cloth made up from cotton. Sometimes, and I've seen myself, people wear like a money belt around. I mean, is this acceptable? Because not only is the money belt stitched, but also it is used to kind of like keep one of the, the haram, the cotton around the waist, to keep it up as a belt, not to let it fall down or drop. Islamically speaking, is this acceptable?
Yes, it's permissible for the himyan or for the belt. It doesn't matter if it's stitched. Most important is the ihram for the men to be non-stitched. Yeah.
Excellent. Sheikh, another question from the email here. The one who works in Mecca, if he left the city for a month, then returned back to resume his work, does he need to wear the ihram for Umrah, knowing that he would not be able to do the rituals due to the outbreak of coronavirus, and since the government is preventing people from the acts of tawaf and sa'i, according to the opinion of Ayatollah Sistani, if possible?
Yes, he's allowed to enter without the ihram. If he was compelled, especially with these restrictions, then he can actually return back without ihram.
Shaykh, the next question, a little controversial, and me and you were discussing it before as well, was that for men, it is a pre-requirement that they are circumcised. If they are not, they will not be able to, perform the Hajj. Now, is this an opinion that is famous, or is this, opinion of all the Maraja, majority of the Maraja, some of the Maraja? And is it actually an obligation? I mean, can someone, for example, a revert, someone who wasn't born Muslim as a young baby, wasn't circumcised, or as a young child, for many adults, it's quite a scary process to get circumcision. So for that person who's not circumcised, first of all, is it a pre-requirement to be circumcised in order to do Hajj? Secondly, what about those who are not circumcised? Can they perform Hajj? According to His Eminence, the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani.
The Sayyid mentions clearly that he should be circumcised. I mean, this individual...
Okay, so that's a requirement, definitely.
And he can actually do the Hajj on the same year after this process. Otherwise, he must delay it till after the circumcision. So maybe in 2 or 3 years' time.
I see.
Depends. And if it's not possible, now the Sayyid elaborates and gives exceptions. To do so because of, let's say, pressures from, let's say, here and there, sometimes he's unable to do it for some reason, then it is obligatory on him to perform the pilgrimage, but this individual, as a matter of precaution, should perform the tawaf himself for both Umrah and Hajj.
Okay.
So Umrah and Hajj, he does the tawaf, and also he hires somebody to do on his behalf the tawaf again.
Okay.
And then the wakil, he does also the salah of the tawaf on his behalf. Then he also performs the salah for himself as well. So in this case, it's like repeating the tawaf twice.
Yes.
As mentioned.
I can't remember what it's called. I mean, it's similar to when you do both the taklif. مثلا, for example, like Jummah prayers, you pray the Jummah and you do the Dhuhr. You do both just in case one is not accepted, and you've kind of like reassured and compensated just in case. So in that case, they'll have to do both again, the tawaf and also get a naib. Sheikhna, if you're aware that when you are performing certain acts, Salah, Saum, even Tawaf and Umrah and the rituals, there's a lot going on, it's rush, it's hot, there's so much, your mind is everywhere, you're trying to concentrate. In the process, you're doing your rituals and so forth, maybe you've completed Hajj, and then you've realized that, there's some najasa on my ihram. I didn't notice when I was performing the ritual. Does the individual have to repeat?
In this case, it is valid. You don't have to repeat the a'mal, because you never knew about, the najasa being on your clothes or on your body. Even if for the tawaf prayer, for example, will be valid as well, which is very important for the tawaf prayer, for example, to be in a complete cleanness. But you never knew about the najasa, especially when the tawaf, you're pushed, you're kicked, for example, by others maybe. And you might injure yourself, but you don't even feel it. You will feel that, let's say, your foot is bleeding after a few hours, for example. So that should be fine. Excellent.
Sheikh, I'd like to thank you, because that is all the questions we have on Hajj, and we've mashallah completed the section on Hajj. For those of you who are joining us and everything, I hope you enjoyed that section, and those of you who have gone to Hajj in Saudi and so forth, those who are performing, inshallah your Hajj is accepted, and we'll move on to the new topic, which is of miscellaneous questions. So a question that's come in here via the email is that if an exceptional situation arises, such as the prescribed income set by Islam is not sufficient to see the situation. For example, if a war breaks out and it is required to raise more funds than prescribed by Khums, what is the way out then?
Well, it becomes obligatory and wajib for the individual to perform what is known as the struggle by soul and struggle by wealth, jihadul nafs and jihadul mal. And that's basically for those who are wealthy, for example, to give their money for the good cause, for protecting Islam, for protecting Muslims, for example. Jihadul nafs, or struggle by oneself and soul, is to go and protect the boundary of the Muslim countries, for example, from the attack of the enemies and so forth. And that's, of course, should be discussed between the ulama to see what is the best option in this situation.
Excellent. Sheikhna, here in the West, we have different types of people from different backgrounds, different faiths. Now, according to our Islam, some of these people are regarded as najis. Here in the workplace, where it permits us to pray salah, we'll perform wudu, and sometimes our clothes are wet. So let's say we're in a situation where my clothes are wet, I've just performed wudu, I've got wet sleeves and so forth. I'm going to go pray salah, and then one of my colleagues come, who is not a Muslim, who is of a different, a polytheistic background, so a non-monotheistic background, so maybe they're Hindu or one who worships more than one god. Someone who's regarded as najis comes and touches me, and touches my clothes and says, "Oh, what's this? Why is it wet?" My clothes now, are they najis? Are they still tahir? Can I pray with these clothes or not? What am I supposed to do here in this situation?
If there was a contact and there was a moisture or wetness transferable, then it is mandatory to render tahir. Of course, when we say mandatory, it's for the purpose of salah. You have salah, you must be in purity when you pray. So you have to make it tahir as a precaution.
Okay, so try and keep some spare clothes at work then, just in case you need to change the pray. Shayla, a question from the WhatsApp is from it's asking that here in the West, there are no Sharia courts, and there is limited access to the waqils of the Maraja. Can a sister or a lady, can she seek divorce from the local authority, the local councils and so forth?
You see, the divorce and the ahkam should be done through the Sharia law or the Islamic law. So she needs to go back to the alim, the alim or the hakim al-shari' or the rep, in order to do the proceedings of divorce or even marriage. The ones in the court are just for the purpose of civil issues and so forth. I mean that it shows as legally she's your wife or husband. But the Sharia should be applied in this first place.
Okay.
So that's important. Before they actually meet and approach by each other, they have to make sure that they are halal on each other through the a proper aqd, a sharia aqd, or divorce.
I see. Excellent. Shaykhna, I've got a question that's coming from the email. If wine is served at a table, it is haram for a Muslim to sit at the table. What is meant by table? Does this apply to the entire group that has gone to the restaurant, or some are being served alcohol? And if the table are more than one, or does it apply to the one table and not the group? In the sense that if there are two separate tables, it would be permissible to sit at the table on which the alcohol is not being served, even if they are part of the same company. I am Khalid of Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani. So we have here either one long table and maybe there's a group right at the end that have alcohol on that side, but on the other side there's no alcohol whatsoever. Or you go to some places where they join many tables up together so everyone can sit together. There's no alcohol on my square table, but on the one maybe 2-3 tables down there's alcohol there. What is the ruling according to Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani?
The criterion is one table, and this is one table as you can see. If there's alcohol, it's haram to remain seated on the table in which alcohol is served, even if you don't drink it. Let's say your non-Muslim friend wants to drink it, you're not allowed to sit on it. And we have narrations that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam were faced with such difficult moments when some who were on the same banquet or table, they were not really religious or from different sects of Islam, and they were brought alcohol or wine in which the Imam stands up and he leaves the majlis straight away. He leaves the lunch, he leaves everything to show that this is haram. So yes, one table, one banquet would be considered as in which the one is haram to sit, and even if he doesn't consume. But the Sayyid mentions that this is based on the precaution على كل حال احتياط وجوبي. He says also eating and drinking at the table is haram based on obligation precaution احتياط وجوبي when there is alcohol or wine on that table. So you have to make sure you avoid sitting on such tables. I know some people would ask me, let's say university students or staff at work, they invite them for let's say lunch and so forth.
Sometimes that in the corporate world there's a lot of meetings, contract signing,
they have to avoid
where there's loads
they have to avoid
of alcohol.
They have to avoid it. You have to be frank and say to them that we're not allowed to sit on the same table when there's alcohol served.
Or don't sit at the table.
Or don't go at all. That's it, yeah. You have to avoid it.
Ahsant. Shaykhna, next question is in regards to an individual working at a hospital who is male, and sometimes they have to see adolescent females as patients. If they are to refuse to take the case or to see the patient, it can cause issues. It can cause to even for an individual to lose their job. Islamically speaking, what is the taklif here?
In this case, it is permissible if the one is compelled. He would face difficulty if he actually refuses to treat such patient. But this should only be done only with the limited, let's say, in the scope of the treatment only, in this limit, in this boundary.
Yes.
So he shouldn't go beyond that. So he shouldn't commit other harams just because of the treatment. Sometimes you see some doctors, although there's a small part of the body should be shown, but he would expose or ask for more other parts of the body to be exposed and shown. So try to treat to the minimum.
So stay within your limits.
Exactly.
Do your job properly, professionally, and inshallah, you'll be okay. Inshallah. Thank you very much, Shaykhna. Thank you to all those joining us today on Ahkam SOS. Shaykhna, a big thank you to you, because I understand that there's a lot of research that goes into looking at Hajj and the Hajj rituals, and also looking at the individual maraja and if they have a different opinion. So much went into it. Thank you so much. For those of you, inshallah, in Saudi who are doing Hajj, the locals and so forth, inshallah, your Hajj is accepted. And for those who, like myself, didn't get to go this year, inshallah, we'll get another opportunity next year and the finances to actually perform this great pilgrimage. Inshallah, Ahkam SOS will be back again on Monday with a brand new topic, inshallah. Join us then 6:30 here on Imam Hussein TV 3. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.